Hey, welcome everybody. We've 59 people. I have no idea how many people will be here in the end, because you know how these things go, meetups, Zoom meetings, webinars, whatever. You share it around, so many people RSVP, say yes, and then some people at least show up. But at least 61, that's a really great number. As you can see, this is a second reading session from a new book we have out. This is the book, by the way. It's not really the book, it's a printout sort of thing. 97 things every Scrum practitioner should know. 97 essays about Scrum. And the people you see on the screen, David Starr, Rich Hundhausen, and Lagestee, have each contributed articles. David sort of only one. Now Rich and Len actually three. But they're not the champions. The real champion, I think, is James Copley. I think he contributed 5 articles. Wow. I was very enthusiastic about all this thing. So the plan for today is the following. I have selected, from David only one, but for the other ones, I have selected one of their articles. I'm going to start by reading the article by David. Read the article. In the meantime, please use the Q&A window. I do hope you're better at using Zoom than I clearly am. So use the Q&A window, type in the questions you would have first for Dave and then afterwards for Rich and then for Len. And then if you're smart and you see a question you like, don't type it again, but vote the existing question up. So there should be a voting option in the Q&A thing. And then after my reading, which I assume it's an estimate, you never know with estimates, I assume it's going to take about 10 minutes. We'll take some time for your questions. And who knows, these people might actually have an answer. I truly believe that they actually wrote those articles themselves, so that might be good. Yeah? Okay, cool. So let me have let's just start with this. I would like first to introduce David Starr to anybody of you. He's the guy with, there's 2 guys with a hat and a beard.
Hello?
Yeah, is the guy saying, okay, so that's David Starr. David, we've known each other for quite a while, I realized. Because back in 2013, when I wrote the first version of my little book, a book is called, by the way, Scrum, a Pocket Guide. The first version had a blue cover with a traveler's first and then the blue version of this. When I had finalized the manuscript, sort of the draft, but really advanced draft, I actually sent it to David for a review. And he was so kind. I think he did a review because he came back saying, you know what, Gunther, don't change one word. Keep it as it is. So that left me a little bit in the blue, knowing, did he actually read it and like it? Or was it just like, I haven't read it, but you know, well, I assume he actually read it because he wrote me a very, very beautiful thing.
Not only that, but I have 2 copies on my shelf right now.
Cool. So, and I still like that. And the thing he wrote was, Gunther has expertly packaged the right no-nonsense guidance for teams seeking agility without a drop of hyperbole. And that's the part I like the most, without a drop of hyperbole. So this is the book about agility with Scrum I wish I had written. So sorry for stealing your dream with that, David. So I've picked the article from David from the book is called Automating Agility. It is part of part 4. So the 97 articles in the book have been spread out over 10 parts, so 10 themes. I've ordered Dave's article into part 4, which is called Development is Multifaceted Work. But it also has a link to the other 2 articles that we'll read. Yeah? Okay, cool. If you're all set, here we go. Article 33, it is actually in the book of the 97. Automating Agility. Modern product delivery systems, typically continuous integration and continuous delivery systems, are helping teams deliver superior quality software more quickly than ever. An extraordinary side effect of these systems is how they can change a team's dynamic, helping it find agility as if by accident. Automated product delivery systems are not only enabling the testing of software, they are changing the way teams work together, bringing the true promise of agility with Scrum almost consequently. Here we go. Scrum calls for cross-functional teams. For example, when the product delivery system blocks due to a failing test, it may well be a database specialist who collaborates with a front-end developer to get the test passing again and the system back online. The don't break the build rule improves team collaboration. When a code commit causes a failing test, it is fixed right away, keeping a culture of quality and automation inherent to the team. This brings the team together to focus holistically on the product and its production system, regardless of individual specialties. Teams with such systems may release confidently to production many times per day. But I thought we can only deliver once per sprint. You might be thinking, well, there's nothing in the Scrum Guide that says a team cannot deliver more than one increment per sprint. With a continuous product delivery system in place, this is even exactly what the team is doing, regardless of whether they are releasing all the way to production or not. Teams working this way often take on aspects of Scrum bit by bit. It usually starts with a daily Scrum, standing or not, which can be invaluable when facilitated properly. The point is to create a plan for the next 24 hours, not to dwell on what everybody did yesterday. A Scrum board will inevitably pop up somewhere, whether physical or digital. Now the team is visually tracking its work and can make observations about its performance. A team new to Scrum often tries to implement sprint planning meetings first. That's David. I strongly encourage focusing on retrospectives instead. This invaluable discussion focuses on what the team will improve next, whether it be an improvement in automation or in how the daily Scrum is conducted. Teams should keep a backlog of things to improve over time. Pulling from this backlog is a perfect way to gradually mature, grow Scrum practices, and improve the craftsmanship in the software delivered. Over time, successful teams will take on more of Scrum's artifacts, events, and rules until they are truly a Scrum team. They separate planning from reflecting in their meetings and insist on an empowered product owner. The Scrum team may even start coordinating planning with other dependent teams. In short, just by doing what is effective can lead a team to Scrum almost by accident. And the Scrum Guide provides a framework upon which to build excellence. Using an automated production system may seem like a strictly engineering activity, but the tools often set the rules. So combining such a system with Scrum can positively transform a team and the way they build product. Scrum teams prioritizing automation will deliver high-quality software at a rate considerably faster than a team with less mature and more manual practices. I still love the article, so thank you a lot, David, for this. I've no idea, do you have some questions coming in? Have a look, otherwise you can just talk about your article too. So what I personally like a lot, besides the fact that I truly love David, is the fact it almost starts with that automation stuff, not just for technical engineering stuff in itself, but almost as an enabler for a team to emerge from that. and almost like Scrum to emerge from it. So, David, up to you. Have you seen some questions coming in? Is this something you want to share with us?
Had to unmute there. Absolutely. There are 2 questions out so far, and let's take a look. One from Natalie, a question about multiple deliveries within the sprint, but not necessarily going to production. I urge teams to consider their work done when it's live in production. No definition of done for now. It's in the works. Am I getting it wrong? Well, given the fact that there is currently no definition of done for now, I would propose that maybe that's where you would want to start focusing. That the idea of having a definition of done is more important than the definition itself as we get started, certainly. And the notion of being into production as our marker for definition of done is something that a lot of teams do. Particularly those that are using continuous delivery methods. However, I think it's incredibly important to realize that not all software delivers that way. Websites often do, but what about the over 1 million lines of code that goes into a ventilator, a medical ventilator? They're not going to ship that thing every couple of days. So they may push their code so far as an integrated test environment. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate place to land as a definition of done, that we've passed all of our quality rigor and we are sitting inside of a environment that mirrors production, but that is not production itself. Just so long as we keep all of those quality gates checked along the way. So it looks like that one, I hope that answered the question. If not, please jump back in. So somebody, Marianne is calling out, but the tools often set the rules. So combining such a system with Scrum can positively transform a team in the way they build product. When taking on such an incremental adoption of Scrum, supported by automated delivery, what does automated delivery system reveal to teams? Oh, that's a great question. And on the contrary, what are misleading signals an automated delivery system might raise? Wonderful. So what I would suggest is that when a team sits down on a greenfield project in particular and begins working toward not only building the product, but building the team, that they are going to hopefully start implementing certain quality practices. And those would be enacted by the continuous delivery pipeline or the continuous integration pipeline, right? And that might be that first my unit tests are run and passed with every commit. That might be the first thing we do. Well, if we do that, then we've already started to set in motion the idea that we're going to have a culture of quality on our team. That very simple act. And from that point on, every quality gate that we add, which might be something like we run integration tests and then we package our libraries and put them into repositories and pull them out again and deploy them, all these sorts of things. As we expand our automation pipeline, we are by definition expanding our definition of done. And what I think teams fail to realize sometimes is that that's in fact what they're doing, is expanding their definition of done. And that is probably one of the biggest things they're going to get with regard to tying those pipelines directly to Scrum, except for the collaboration that it's going to bring. That collaboration that it brings also ties directly to Scrum, because we have to work together to get past any failed quality gate. So when taking on an incremental delivery, What does automated delivery bring to the team? It will reveal its inability to collaborate, if that exists, and its inability to deliver, if that exists. What misleading signals might it send? Not sure off the top of my head. As I think about that, there may be the notion in mind that I am unable to deliver because I have not yet implemented a given feature and or capability in my software. And remember, we talked a moment ago about what it means to deliver. It may not mean that we go all the way to production. So do I have to have a fully baked feature set to go all the way to my in-test environment? No, I don't. I can still consider that a valid delivery of software that has exercised my entire delivery pipeline. So we don't want teams to get hung up on whether or not they have delivered that fully working increment midway through the sprint cycle. It's perfectly fine that they don't have a marketable product, even though they have one that works quite well. And I hope that answers that question. Any other thoughts from the other panelists? Please jump in. And I'm going to read up on the next question here. To get a mature team, there needs to be support coming from the organization itself. Too often, for instance, management is slowing growth and self-organization of a team. One of the reasons I see behind this is the management or stakeholders are not being coached or taught sufficiently and just expected to change their behavior 180 degrees after attending a course. How do you feel about the discussion about team maturity, where management maturity or mindset adoption might be the major lacking factor? Well, I would say that I hope I don't find myself in that position.
Yeah.
And in my experience, those, I don't mean to plug something, but I'm going to do it anyway. I happen to be a Pluralsight author, for those of you who know what Pluralsight is. And my latest course is called Scrum for Executives, Leaders, and Your Boss. And the reason I wrote that course and the reason I created it is because of this question. We have to have organizational support or it's not going to work. And we might have a bottom-up implementation of Scrum, inspire those at the top of our organization, but we have to be able to evangelize it, right? And we have to be able to talk about it to those above us, if you will, in an organizational hierarchy, should such a thing exist in your company. You need to be able to evangelize Scrum so that they're going to support you top down. And that's necessary in order for all of the teams involved, which let's say we're talking about 1,000 individuals making up many Scrum teams. We have to coordinate them together. And to do that, you have to have top-down support. So
yeah, if I can just build on that just for a second, if you don't mind. You know, oftentimes we do this divide between, I'm going to get a team started in Scrum, and then we separate them out from their managers or from leaders and attempt to do two things. So we build a cool environment and cool engagement with the teams, but leaders or managers are kind of left out of that picture. So just from a practical perspective, when I launch a team, I always launch it as a whole system. So I will get their managers involved from the very beginning. I'll create a ring fence and say, hey, inside of this ring fence, you are going to lead in a different way. You're going to manage in a different way. We're going to build a trustworthy system with trusting leaders. And if you want to participate in this, then you have to be engaged in that. You know, we're not going to push you away from this team. We're going to bring you closer, and we're going to build a holistic system of visionary leaders and empowered kick-ass teams who are delivering incremental progress frequently, and everything's going to be transparent and open while we're doing it.
I love that.
Can I just add something to it? Just connecting to what David wrote about. It's called automating agility. So it's about automation and how automation can be such an almost accelerator, not just technically engineering wise, but also to Scrum, which Sander is even the more difficult part of your question, because a lot of organizations, call them managers, leadership, whatever, it's sort of the last thing on their mind, automation and investing in automation. Yet we are here saying that it's such a crucial, almost accelerator, which then connects a little bit to the question from Mikkel, from Denmark, saying that can you truly do Scrum without automation? Well, in a software or a product delivery environment, it's probably going to be very difficult without automation. In other environments, it might be possible, but it's one of the last things sort of on their minds. It's sort of very low on the investment, whatever priorities in general. Okay, Dave, you have like 4 or 5 minutes. I hope that answered Sander's question a little bit.
Would you mind, Gunther, pulling out a question or two for me to answer?
Oh yeah, cool. So let me take just the next one has at least one vote from Shirley. I don't know. I don't know you ever met Shirley. She's a PhD from the Philippines. So hi, David. Thank you
Wonderful.
for your article. What are some suggestions you can give to organizations who are new to these complementary practices and are just starting with automating their processes for builds and deployments? How could they get started?
I think the simplest thing we could possibly do is how we get started. What that is going to be contextual to your environment. If we are talking about, and I think you are, software development teams, then the simplest thing that we hope we can do is build our software, get it to build, compile, right? And produce whatever the output artifacts are from that compilation. And we don't want that to happen on the desktop under my desk that's been sitting there for the last 7 years. And we don't want that to happen on, a team member's laptop. That doesn't count. What we're looking for is to have a genuine, dedicated system that when we command it to, when we send a trigger to it, it's going to build our software. Now those triggers are sort of the genesis of how often do you run your automation, right? It could run on a timer. You could build once a day. You could have to wait for that build to happen. That's still better than not building at all through an automated system on a dedicated machine. The second most valuable thing I would suggest is that your product builds each and every time you commit code into your version control repository. And that, of course, assumes you're using one, and I'm going to assume that everyone is. And then finally, the next thing that I would suggest, and I'm not going to go past here because there are so many things that we can do in a continuous deployment system. The next thing I would suggest is simply that we start writing a few tests that we can also execute at such time as we execute that build. So if we build our software and then we run a few unit tests associated with that software, we're off to a great start.
Cool. Okay, I hope that thank you. That helped you. I'm first going to just pick up the question by Sven Peter, because he asked about if you would go for the sort of step-by-step thing that you introduced, David, in your article, Scrum implementation. What would be the first Scrum event? If you don't mind, you're actually saying in your article that you should always have a retrospective, because that will help you reflect and think about automation and so on. But if you read through the lines, you're saying sort of 2 things are sort of indispensable: daily Scrum and retrospective.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. And if I had to choose between one of the 2 of those, a daily Scrum or a retrospective, I would take a retrospective.
Yeah. Probably the first thing that most people want to skip. Just make sure you keep doing that.
The first thing that a team will tend to cut once they reach a high level of performance, and it's the reason that their performance will then begin to wane. That's true.
Okay, cool. And then that's the last question, because then we have to move on, but I still want to throw it in, David. It's from Bhuvan. Bhuvan, by the way, is a guy I know in India, great guy. And he asked a question, a very technical one, so really cool for you. What kind of branching strategy has worked well for the teams you worked with in the context of automation? So branching and automation.
I love the fact that every conversation about software revolves around your branching model. I love that. I'm going to assume for a moment that you're using Git, because who isn't? And with regard to that, I would say there is a prescribed model out there called Git Flow, which works just fine for most software endeavors. Certainly ones that aren't, 1,000 developers committing code into a single code base. And that is a good place to start. Have a look at Git Flow as a process mechanism for how you're going to manage your branching and merging strategy in Git. If you're talking about sort of old school version control, I'll leave that to Richard Hundhausen.
Oh man. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We've got 2 more open questions. I'm going to, that's the only option I have, dismiss them for right now. It's not because I want to dismiss them. Maybe we'll come back to them after the 3 reading sessions. Yeah?
I'll try typing answers.
Yeah, okay, that's cool too. Okay, cool. I'll move on to the next article, and that's one by Richard Hundhausen. Rich, I assume somebody said that you look like George Clooney.
I saw that. I don't know if that's a question or.
I have no idea where they got the idea from, but
made my day, I guess.
Let's just believe him. And,
sure.
Okay, so Rich contributed actually 3 articles to the book, and one of them is it's article 26 is from what I call part 3 in the book, so 3, and part 3 in the book is called "Collaboration is Key." And then Rich's article 26 is called "Is Your Team Working as a Team?" So let me read it for you. So the people, I don't know, I know Rich fairly well. He's a development guy, and he thinks, he actually knows something about Scrum. He's been very instrumental in the developer courses that were created at Scrum.org. He is very involved and engaged in a lot of DevOps movements, a lot with Microsoft technology stacks. So great. So be ready for something about the team, but if you want to know anything about Microsoft technology, he's the guy. Okay, so is your team working as a team? Of the many teams I've met, most were practicing Scrum. Others were considering it. They all wanted to become more agile. When asked if they were working as a team, they always answered in the affirmative. Each member of the team was busy doing something, and the team usually got something done. And they would stand up every day too. Great. But were they working as a team? There are many ways to work as a team. Some ways are highly collaborative. Some maximize learning. Some minimize cycle time. Unfortunately, there are ways that are all about individual specializations and output. To the untrained eye, they can look like a harmonious team. However, they actually maximize the risk of not delivering, as today's complexity requires combining skills and even cross-learning of skills to succeed. Over the years, I started identifying and classifying the various styles of teamwork and assessing their impact on the collective. There are 4 ways that are dysfunctional in terms of the ability to collectively deliver and to transcend being just a group of individuals. So from the 4 dysfunctional patterns which has seen, the first one is called hoarding. And hoarding means the following. After sprint planning, one developer claims ownership of multiple product backlog items to do all the work on those items in isolation. Intra-team dependencies, such as knowledge, and external impediments get the developer to cherry pick among the selected items, ending the sprint with all items open, but nothing done. The second dysfunctional pattern is called hogging. After sprint planning, one developer again, takes ownership of a single product backlog item to do all possible work, moves on to do the same with the next product backlog item, and so on. Dependencies and impediments are similar to hoarding, but the single piece focus slightly increases transparency, reducing the risk of not getting the item done. The third dysfunctional pattern, specializing. Developers work those tasks pertaining to their specialties on different product backlog items and maximize their specialization across all items. Dependencies are high, but remain hidden until towards the end of the sprint, when late integration greatly increases risk. Last pattern, dysfunctional pattern 4, generalizing. A developer works a few different types of tasks. Not having all the skills required, the person will start work on a new product backlog item, a PBI, when blocked. Dependencies might not be as high as specializing, but integration still occurs late, increasing risk. Teams that start working in any of the following 3 ways enter the circle of team collaboration goodness. Help me believe in that. The circle of team collaboration goodness, a brilliant thing, where mutual learning happens as an opportunity for professional development, and it's a must to reduce dependencies and risk. So sort of 3 functional rather than dysfunctional patterns. First one, pairing. 2 developers co-create the same PBI as a pair, potentially changing the pair composition in search of all expertise to get the item done. Pairs might be part of a larger swarm on a single PBI. Now, just little call to action from me. Long time ago, back in 2003, when I started with Scrum, I was sort of lying because I started with extreme programming. And we did pair programming all the way, every single line of code. No doubts, difficult, not difficult, complex, no, all the way through. It was brilliant. It builds a team, it gels a team, it increases quality, it lowers cost, whatever. It has so much amazing things. So thank you, Richard, for bringing that up. Now, the second positive or functional pattern is called swarming. All developers, alone or in pairs, work on a single product backlog item, doing whatever is required until the product backlog item is done. And now the third one, mobbing. All developers work on a single task of a single product backlog item until that product backlog item is done. Like in swarming, previous one, there is no jumping or moving on before the product backlog item is done. So Richard introduces 4 dysfunctional patterns he's seen and 3 great patterns. And he says, hence his article, by saying, I hope this helps you contemplate how your development team works. Where would you situate your team on their journey? What patterns have you observed emerging? How can you help the team move forward to become a highly collaborative team rather than a group of individuals? So go in, make it, give Richard a difficult time answering some questions. It's all about teamwork and collaboration.
Thanks, Gunther. You have a great voice. You need a little fireplace in the background there, and just make this a nightly thing.
Okay, cool.
So I put a link in the chat window just to the graphic that's from this article. So it shows the 4 dysfunctional ways of working and the 3 functional ways of working. And now, as far as questions go, I'm seeing some in here still from Dave. In fact, Dave, go ahead and take all these, will you? You did such a great job the last time around.
I'll just quickly share the picture on the screen, so for everybody.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah. So hoarding, hogging, specializing, generalizing. You can do better than that.
Cool. So let's have a look at the questions. You have some questions already coming in?
Only one I see there is from Gwillem about maybe having how the Scrum Master can help. It's hard to say. We should have them prefix the questions with our names or something.
There's one from Miguel. I'll read it to you, Richard. How's that?
Yeah, go for it.
Gosh, they're coming in so quickly.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Do you see it as possible to work as a team if the team members are not T-shaped or pie-shaped or cone-shaped? And if not, does that mean that a new or not very mature team usually, lost it again, usually are not actually doing Scrum before all team members start becoming T-shaped?
That's a good question. Thanks, Mikkel, for asking that. If you go back to the Scrum Guide, it just says that the team must be cross-functional. So that means that the development team needs to have all the skills to be able to deliver done working product, but it doesn't say anything about the individuals. I'm a fan of the T-shape idea. It's not required, but what is required is to live and grow by the Scrum values. And the Scrum value of openness is all about being teachable. It's all about being open to new ideas and new learning. So I'm going to say that is the avenue into a team, no matter where they start, because you can take a team that's been doing Scrum for many years, and you can still have people who are very ossified in their beliefs and their abilities. They could be less open than new teams. So I'd say it's more about that Scrum value and being able to learn new things. And if, for those of you who don't know what T-shaped is, it's this idea that the letter T has this this deep spike here that's your deep specialization in something. Hopefully you're on a development team because you have some skills at coding or testing or designing or architecting or data stuff, or you make things look pretty or whatever. But probably more important is this cross part up here. This is more of the generalizing plane, and it means that at the very minimum you're not allergic to doing other kinds of work. You're open to that kind of work and even learning how to become maybe a specialist in other kinds of work. So then over time, maybe you can be pie shape, which would be 2 spikes of specialization, or comb shape, which is multiple spikes. But again, yeah, just promote that openness. To kind of dovetail with Gwillem's question about how can the Scrum Master help this? The Scrum Master should help the team nurture and live by those Scrum values, and remind them occasionally what that openness one means and looks like.
Cool. Just quickly, sort of technically, can I pick up the question sort of on the bottom from Marijn van der Zee, a Dutch guy I know, asking Rich about the difference between swarming and mobbing, and how do mobbing teams take their PBIs differently from swarming teams?
Yeah. Can I share my screen for a second? I have a slide from one of my classes I teach.
Co-host, you're a panelist, you can take completely.
I can do what I want. I have master control. Can I have you leave the meeting then, Gunther, and we can just move along? All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
So here's how I describe it. Pairing swarming and mobbing, the circle of goodness here. Pairing is, and again, I'm using kind of the task metaphor here, which is to say that in our sprint backlog, we have, the forecasted product backlog items we're going to deliver, and then some kind of a plan for delivering them. And a lot of teams I work with use tasks to formulate their plan. So if you kind of think about, tasks or small sticky notes to help implement the larger PBI sticky notes, fantastic. Pairing would be, two people on one task, one keyboard. So it could be two coders, a coder and a tester, a coder and an analyst, but two dev team members, or a dev team member and an outsider, some subject matter expert, and they're doing it for learning, they're doing it for validation. And it's, like Gunther says, it's been around for decades. It's a fantastic practice. Swarming is not necessarily pairing, although you can pair in a swarm, but swarm would be the whole dev team working on a single PBI. So this is, I coach teams that, once the product backlog items are brought into the sprint, they're going to have a natural order that's essentially the same order as the items were in the product backlog that the product owner, ordered them by. So, hey, why not, reduce risk and maximize your opportunities to get the most important things done by swarming on those PBIs. So this would be the whole team working on PBI number 1 in this case, maybe different tasks, maybe pairing, maybe individuals, doesn't matter. And then mobbing is this kind of fairly new thing, which is just, pairing plus. It's the whole dev team, one monitor, one keyboard, and they just go task by task, through the mob with a time box per person at the keyboard. And yes, this means that the tester or the non-technical people is writing code. It means that the analyst or the UX designer is writing database scripts. But the good news is they've got people on either side of them that know what to do and what to type and what not to type. So you're always in this safety net with the other team members around you, and learning can just skyrocket when you're mobbing like that.
Cool. I think that will help clear out a little bit what you mean. So now, can I give you the highest question, the highest priority question?
Sure.
It says, how much cross-functional team is possible when we are building a complex system like autonomous driving, where we have people with strong knowledge on functional safety, system engineering, software engineering, and so on? Is it possible to create a cross-functional or cross-functional teams, considering vertical slicing of a story or a feature?
This is a good question. This almost gets into a scaling situation, because I'm guessing that you've got so much work and such a large product there that you might need multiple teams. So I also have some experience with Nexus. That's Scrum.org's professional Scrum scaling framework. And there you would definitely need a cross-functional nexus to be able to deliver that product. Hopefully over time, making each of those individual Scrum teams cross-functional so that any one of them could be a customer-facing feature team for any part of the product. But I get the undertone here of your question, that may not be possible in the beginning, because that's a lot of expertise to spread probably very thin on teams of 3 to 9 people around your organization. So do what you can. I think sometimes, and this is my own personal feeling, that at scale like this, it may be more important to be mindful of the dependencies and mitigate them than it is to focus on a slice of value each sprint. I know it's kind of antithetical to what we talk about in Scrum for single teams, but which one's going to have the less risk? That you identify and mitigate the dependencies across teams, and that can be dependencies, not just technical dependencies, but people and skill sets and access to code bases and all of that. Or is it that you focus on delivering a vertical slice per team? Again, at scale, I think it's important to have value that you can actually inspect at the sprint review. So you want a vertical slice across all the teams in your integrated increment. So I'm rambling and throwing in lots of things here about scaling, but that's a good question.
And also, and use, I like what you just said, it's what I described, but it's Nexus or whatever. If you have multiple teams working together on one system or one product, whatever you want to call it,
right.
The system working on it should be as a whole cross-functional. Not every
Yes.
entity, whatever within the system in itself needs to be cross-functional, but as a whole, they should be able to produce valuable outcomes. And
Absolutely.
then you use the retrospective to look back and help them think on how they can move towards a higher ability to do that.
Absolutely. So David or Len, any other advice on cross-functional teams like that, something that complex?
I think the higher up the functionality ladder you go in the product itself, the more cross-functional the teams need to be. And while we might be talking cross-functional at a single team level of various skill sets with regard to programming capabilities, the expertise that was mentioned in the question had different domains of expertise in it, which I think are at a higher level of a very, very large product. So like an autonomous driving system, right? Somebody's got to know the rules of the road. Someone else has to know how a car works, et cetera. So at some point, you've probably got a group of very experienced technical, maybe even non-technical leaders working together as a cross-functional team and taking their message out to the rest of the organization.
And it still brings us back, in my view, to sort of some of the origins of Scrum, which was in the 1986 paper of the new product development game, which described most successful new product development teams and organizations, and building things like laser printers, copiers, and even Honda on building cars more successfully, new cars, developing them and getting them out onto the market. And the idea was still always self-organization, but also the tension from bringing all those people with all those skills together, giving them ideas, challenges, objectives, whatever, and then allow them to figure out how to do that. That was sort of the built-in tension that they described. So even at that level, it is actually possible. And that, I was also reminded of that. So there was the next question, Richard, was from Lena. Says, my team has finally realized they need to learn more about the other developers' specialized areas. I want to encourage it as much as possible. How do I help them take that responsibility and not just do it because I want them to? Now, Lena, I want to go back a little bit to the new product development game, because it has this beautiful idea that it was not just about being cross-functional as a team or a system, but it was, on top of that, it was about cross-fertilization. People picking up new skills, learning from that. So in my view, you want to use Scrum to create a context, an environment in which people are invited to learn new stuff too. So not just lock themselves into their specialization. And if you're working like with eager professionals that buy into the purpose of the product and so on, and you create an environment and give them that room to do that, they hopefully would be eager to self-develop, not just develop great products, but also self-develop. It's very difficult to program or to sort of impose on people. So a lot is, I feel a lot is in the environment that you want to create for people and foster.
Well, that was kind of the idea behind Daniel Pink's book Drive a few years ago, which is, how to motivate creative people, and everybody on the team, not just the coders and the designers, but testers, architects, content developers, tech writers, everybody is creative. So, appeal to their creative senses in going back to Len's question here, to share those skills. It's not so much, hey, in this sprint, you will teach this person what you know. It's, hey, why don't you show off and share with other people what you know, and appeal to their creativity, and get the organization behind it. Maybe take Friday afternoons just to do a show and tell or a brown bag, or get off site and do it. And you could make it fun, turn it into a neat activity. Yeah,
it's good that you refer to Daniel Pink too, because in one of the articles I read last week from the book is an article by James Copley. And the article is called "Specialization is for Insects." So you get the idea. That's for insects. Humans are have a lot more skills than just specialized skills. And he also refers to Daniel Pink, saying that you don't misinterpret the idea of mastery of Daniel Pink. It doesn't mean hyper specialization in only one thing. It also means achieving skills and hopefully mastery in something you haven't done before, if that might help other people and sort of the ecosystem around.
Yeah, I'd rather see people specialize in the Scrum values, but be generalists in the tech skills.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we take a couple of more minutes and answer a few more questions. So a question,
Yeah, sure.
Richard, by Sunil. Sunil is a guy from India, no? He works, I think, somewhere in Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken, Sunil. And he wants to know how to handle the team who, even after coaching and after training, still create a culture of specialization and sort of waterfall things in sprints.
Yeah, that's a
So
tough one.
with all the patterns you've seen and the dysfunctional.
Sure. I mean, because one of the prime directives in Scrum is nobody outside the dev team tells them how to work. So if the dev team, this sort of self-organizing black box of 3 to 9 people, quote unquote, self-organize back to some, patterns of work that maybe aren't so transparent or aren't so empirical, gosh, it's really hard to kind of get in there and crack that. You've got to make sure that there is that self-organization, genome in there somewhere, and it's allowed to grow. It could be you've got a couple of very strong personalities, driving those decisions, people that have been with the company for years, or, have those deep waterfall roots that keep going back to those reactions, those returns. Yeah, you've got to be able to, get a hold of the other people and let them, instill in them that sense of courage that they can, bring up their ideas and question this, and everyone is in there should have an equal voice. But it is a tough question. I'm guessing Sunil is asking kind of as a Scrum Master, and that's hard territory to get into, because you can coach and show, and demonstrate and all of these things, but at the end of the day, it's kind of their decision. Yeah. So it might be that
for me, it always starts by expressing at least your belief, your trust that can actually do that.
Yeah.
And that sounds more simple than it might be, because for 20, 30, whatever years, we have denied people the right to sort of take matters into their own hands.
Absolutely.
So people are not used to it anymore. So even if you try to create an environment and make it open for people to actually do that, it is going to take a while before it actually starts happening. And the biggest danger I've seen that management, leadership, whatever, becomes so impatient because it is not happening that they will intervene anyhow. And that just reinforces the idea of the past. Well, it's not really, it's just fake. They say we can self-organize, but they will intervene anyhow. So often, Sunil, it's a matter of keeping enough people out the door for a while and patience sometimes.
And it reminds me of a saying, you've all heard of KISS, right? Keep it simple. Stupid, keep it simple. Software, keep it simple. Solution, whatever. Well, I've got a new one here I'm putting in the chat window. Keep it complicated, keep me employed. Yeah. And that can also be the reaction of some of the people on these ossified teams, because management, will come at them with hammer and tongs, and they got to make sure that they can, stay hidden in the complexities of what they do, and nobody else can know what I do because I'm really just protecting myself over here.
Yeah, and they might be operating in an environment where sort of everybody claims to be doing Scrum, but it's what I described last year, that it might be building up an illusion of agility if you keep doing Scrum under sort of deadline pressure, team instabilities, management, resource managers always breaking into teams and pulling them apart and then putting people in other teams and so on. So people have to go to meetings all the time that are sort of not related to their work. So there are a lot of things in the context, in the environment, that might get you to use Scrum at least suboptimally.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my first part of my essay here. Everyone's working as a team because they stand around in a circle and they all read their JIRA tickets to each other.
Yeah, talking about JIRA, there's at least 3 articles in the book, by the way, and I'm going to go over to Len after this one. 3 articles in the book about digital tools. So there's a Canadian trainer, Mark Levison, wrote an article. It's called "Your Sprint Backlog Deserves a Life beyond a digital tool. So I like that expression. And then Bas Vodder, the guy from Les, wrote 2 articles, and they're both called something with digital tools considered harmful. So the first one is called Digital Tools Considered Harmful, Sprint Backlog in general. And the second one is called Digital Tools Considered Harmful, Jira. So that's one of them I read last week, which is, by the way, by accident, a beautiful segue to go to Len. Because I know I've known David for quite a while. I've known Richard for quite a while. Beautiful people, I love them. Once I can get back into the US, I'll give them a big hug. It's gonna take a while. I had no idea who Len Lagestee was. No idea at all. Still, he ended up with 3 articles in the book, and that's why, because I was working with several people, and one of them was actually Bas Vodder from the LESS framework. And Bas, at some point in time during the process of collecting and adding stuff and so on, he said, you know what, hey, Gunther, are you still looking for additional articles or additional offers? Because if so, here's a website that has some great stuff. I have no idea who it is, but it's got some great articles. So I went to look into that and said, oh yeah, cool, indeed, some great articles. So let me, it was quite a search to find your email address, Len, but I found it anyhow. So in the end, it was a website by Len, and he invited Len, hey, would you feel like contributing to this? I can imagine he was thinking, well, hell, is this serious? Never heard of that guy. Some strange Belgian guy claiming to invite me to contribute to a book. He did it anyhow. I'm really happy he contributed 3 articles. and one of them is this one. So.
That was indeed my reaction.
Okay. So I'm glad it worked out anyhow. And you saw, it was actually serious. This real book is coming out. Imagine. And one of the articles that Len contributed is also, it's part of part 3, also collaboration is key. Same part that the article of Richard is part of. And it's article 32, by the way, and it's called Becoming a Radiating Team. And I picked it because it's got some, so Len has this talent and quality to put in some really nice nuggets, but you have to catch them, you have to read them, and then maybe you'll find out. So the presence of transparency creates an environment for trust to flourish. Without it, small cracks of doubt will eventually become large crevices of distrust. There is a reason transparency is one of the principles of Scrum. And as you all know, transparency as the foundation for empiricism, inspection, adaptation. That's what Len is referring to, I think.
Yes.
Never know. When a Scrum team isn't as transparent as can be expected, when the team is not radiating information sufficiently, leaders are left to speculate, am I getting a return on the investment we have made in this team? If there is any doubt in this answer, the next step is probably to request a status report or a leader intervention to force the team to become more transparent. Whatever leadership goes transparent at that point in time. Becoming a radiating team takes little effort, as a Scrum team produces a wide range of data over the normal course of their work. We have the antidote to status reports and intervention. And Len continues by giving 5 ways to radiate. And the first one is radiate intention through the product backlog. The product backlog declares unequivocally what is deemed important to build and the sequence in which the team will build it. Make it easily visible on a wall or provide access to a read-only version of it so all interested parties can review and discuss. So radiate intention. The second one is radiate progress through a real-time task wall. The task wall indicates movement. With an ordered product backlog, you radiate how this movement goes toward completing valuable work. If the task wall is stale, meaning tasks remain in progress for days, people should get nervous. Put the task wall in a public place, or if your task wall is virtual, allow read-only access to it. For most people, the details on the task wall won't matter, but seeing energy and progress does. So think about this antidote we have for status reports and leadership jumping. The third radiation, radiate commitment through a burn down or a burn up chart. This chart will radiate the team's ability to deliver a product increment and show when the release of something valuable will likely occur. For most leaders or stakeholders, this is all they need to know. Radiate blockers listed in an impediment list. Be open about what is holding you back. Share what isn't working. Fix what you can and seek help for impediments you can't fix yourselves. Radiate these so others in the organization can learn from you or even help remove the impediments. So the fifth and the last radiation that Len suggests is radiate improvement by displaying velocity. If a task wall represents movement, velocity means you're improving in your ability to create and deliver with speed and efficiency. Velocity is simply a relative metric of completion. What have you done in the past? And are you getting better at finishing things? While mostly an internal team measurement, a radiating Scrum team should be transparent enough to share if they are producing outcomes faster or more slowly. Let that last thing sink in for a while. Radiate improvement by displaying velocity. Think about it. Then Len goes on to complete the article and finish the article by saying, hey, when a team is transparent with the good and the bad, something magical begins to happen. They are given more autonomy. They become more trusted, and trusted teams are confident teams. Beautiful article. It reminded me a little bit of a question I had earlier this week. So we have Mikkel on the call. So this week I did a webinar for people in Denmark as sort of replacement, virtual replacement for the Scrum Days Denmark, because we can't travel and so on. And there was somebody asking about, yeah, but how do you get people to trust each other? How do you get management to trust teams? And my reply was, you cannot make people trust each other. You have to grow trust. It goes step by step by step, from the team to the management and the other way around.
There you go. Yeah, I was thinking, I originally wrote most of this back in 2015, so about 5 years ago, and I put myself back in that situation where, like, what happened to me that caused me to write this situation. And I remember it vividly because this was a time when just got a team together and managers kind of came into play here and asked for a red, yellow, green status report. Like, how are we going to know if the team's doing well? Like, we want to get red if it's bad, green if it's good. And so, you know, as a good coach would do, I told this person, well, it's always going to be red. And then we'll go from there. Like, every once in a while, you might see a little bit of green every once in a while, but what we're going to build here is a team that is going to learn. So there's going to be some days that are going to go really well. There's going to be some days that are going to go poorly. And so just expect everything to be red. But in exchange for your red, yellow, green, here's what you're going to get in return. So here's what we want you to actually look out for. So we want you to be, and I mentioned this earlier, a trusting leader. So you're going to give this team autonomy. You're going to give product owners the decision-making ability that maybe you would have had in the past. You're going to let that go. And we're going to allow this team to thrive in this environment. So what we're going to do in exchange for asking you to be a trusting leader, we're going to give you a trustworthy system. And here's the things that you can start looking for. So you can start looking for movement. If you do see some of these things not happening, and your system or your team is not being trustworthy, then we'll guide you in a conversation to start bringing that back to life. Yeah. So that was the spirit of it as it kind of came together. And you know, I use that word radiate very specifically because it's kind of like a team with a healthy glow. Like it should be there's a health to it. And we've all seen on this panel, we've all seen those teams that there's a healthy hum, there's a crackle of energy, and we want that to be magnified. So that's the spirit of it behind it. So we can kind of jump into some questions if there's any of them there.
Not much. Somebody who wanted to was looking to have the paragraph of velocity in the chat window, and I'm looking it up right now. So that would be good. One of the things I liked a lot was that radiation of movement or progress, because I like the word movement in a way a lot, and it reminds me so much of a situation, and I don't know if anybody recognizes this. I run into that all the time over the past 2-3 years. Let's see if you guys can, I hope you can still see me. I hope that everybody recognizes this, a situation where you have a sprint burnout chart, and it's like it's start of the sprint, it's all the way up there, and all sprint long, it's somewhere around there. And then by the end of the sprint, people hope at least that, whoop, suddenly it goes all the way down. That was what that paragraph reminded me a lot about, Lynn. And I think you're referring to that situation. There's no movement. It doesn't radiate movement. And when you look into that, it's a lot of the times, I don't know if anybody recognizes this, it's just, yeah, but you know what? I have updated my figures, my data in the Jira system or the whatever system. And that's just a sprint burnout chart that sort of rolls out of it. Yeah, but it means you're not using it as a tool, as an instrument. You're not using it as an instrument to manage yourself, and it certainly doesn't radiate trust to the organization. So that's
yeah, exactly. Sprint burnouts are very simply just a means to measure whether you are undercommitted or overcommitted, and so it's a healthy metric to use for a retrospective. So if you're not getting things completed or you're overcommitted, why is that? Like some teams are working on multiple backlogs or jumping around with multiple things and not focused. So it's just really good data.
Yeah, and I just pasted the velocity thing in the chat window.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Just I'll now be sued by my own publisher for giving away stuff in the book for free. No. So I hope that helps a little bit, but at least sort of the same pattern of a team sprint burnout chart, all sprint long, sort of 90% of sprint up there somewhere. Sort of the same what happened with what you call a task wall, which we often call a scrum board. I don't know if anybody recognizes that after day 1 or day 2 of the sprint, sort of you have a task board, scrum board, 3 or more columns, and after day 1 or 2, it's full of post-its. And that's the same effect. That is another team that is using the scrum board or the task board to sort of manage itself and manage its progress and radiate movement. It's what they use to just log and sort of protect themselves and cover up for not being blamed for not. So it's used for bad reporting purposes.
Oh, it looks like there's a question up there from Juneth. Most often we fail to see the value of Agile Scrum framework used in this case due to lack of support, primarily from middle management. There's a buy-in and understanding at the top management and good effort made from the team side, bottom up. Problem is middle management still command and control, even after several workshops or trainings. Any thoughts on address this? I mentioned this a little bit earlier on. A couple of things though is words don't matter usually in this situation. So if leaders say they buy in, It's actions that's going to matter. It's words and behaviors are going to be different. And so we don't just send them the training and hope for the best. So if I'm a Scrum Master, if I'm an Agile coach, I mentioned this early, is when I work with a team, I build a little ring fence around and I say, we're going to pull in your managers into this as well. And we're going to describe what this is going to look like. We're going to describe exactly what the opposite of command and control is going to look like. And so typically what we'll do is we'll get this team set up, start working in Scrum. We have a product owner making decisions on their product backlog. And what I'll do before that is I'll usually get the product owner with the managers or the leaders in a room together and be very intentional about asking if those leaders trust the product owner to make decisions. So look them in the eye. Do you trust this product owner to make decisions for you? And so just about every time they will say yes. It's very rare that they will say no. But what that gives us is now is an anchor point in time that if we see poor behaviors from those leaders, or maybe a leader command and controlling on the team and saying, hey, you put this in your product backlog and I want to do something else, we can now hold that leader accountable. So there's a couple things there. So that's one is we get them to express trust from this point forward. We don't care what's happened in the past, but from this point forward, we will be a trustworthy system and you will trust. And so sometimes the leaders go, well, now what do I do? Like, what's my job? I said, well, listen here, you've got 3 things you could say and 3 things only. You could say, I trust you. You could say, I'm proud of you. And you could say, use your best judgment. Anything else, you come to me first. So if you can't say those things, if you can't say, I trust you, product owner, I can't trust you, team, then you come to me. And we're going to talk through this and we're going to work through this. What is it? Why can't you trust this person? Are they making bad decisions? Do they not have the capability to make the decisions that are necessary? And we're going to work through this together. So I would, that same conversation that I've just described to you, I would expect the Scrum Master or an Agile team coach type of person to have that same thing, that same type of conversation. Part of this is, I see this type of question all the time. Like we always get this, leaders aren't buying in. We kind of have to stop dancing around this. We have to stop dancing around, hey, let's just throw them the training and hope that they're going to get this. We've got to build environments for them to feel uncomfortable. And for a while, their first instincts are going to be very wrong. So they're going to want to step in and fix things and make statements. And we need to get them to think the exact opposite. Now is your time to be silent. Now is your time, instead of making a statement, to ask a question. So we've got to get a little bit more serious, I think, about this and put them in an environment where we immerse them in this new ring fence, this new world of trust and empowerment and autonomy, and let them feel what that feels like. And before long, every time I've been able to do this with these leaders and managers, a weight just starts to slowly lift off their shoulders that says, wow, I don't need to have all the answers. I don't need to be in every meeting. I don't need to dig into all the details. And so before long, they're like, my role is just to be the chief encouragement officer. And that's just a powerful space for them to be in.
Yeah. So that's a great thing, Glenn.
Get serious about it.
But I want to add something to that. So that's a really good point. But I don't know whether you realize it for yourself that your starting point is really great, because it's a very inclusive way of looking at those people. I'll give an example from my experience in a lot of large organizations, certainly in the Netherlands that I worked with. I think a lot of what we typically call middle management was sort of resisting things like Scrum, because in a lot of other organizations, Scrum was used as an excuse to fire a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So there's an idea out there that says, oh, we're going to do Scrum, means we can fire all middle managers. So in my approach, it's very totally in line with very similar to what you do. I try to radiate at least towards managers. No, I'm not here to fire you as an external whatever coach. I'm here to sort of help you rediscover your position within the company based upon this way of working that's called Scrum. How to act differently with teams, how to think differently about resourcing problems, whatever you want to call them. But there's a lot of things out there that say, oh yeah, middleman, we're going to do Scrum, we can now fire middle management. And that scares people a lot.
Yeah, exactly. They're starting to lose their sense of identity often. Like, because I was the, most organizations have this habit of looking up for, what work should I do? Am I doing a good job? Now all of a sudden that shifts away, where now they're looking around. They're looking at their team members. They're looking at their customers. They're close to the people that they're actually delivering value for. So that is an oftentimes a shocking environment to be in for them. Like I was the planets everybody was revolving around, and now all of a sudden I don't have that. So we have to give them something, and usually we just dismiss that and get the teams up and running and build a healthy environment for them. We've got to do something, to your point, with those leaders and managers, to say, here's where you add value.
And just to add a little bit to the optimism around this, I remember, so my first book came out in 2013. I remember a year before that, 2012, that I got a question exactly like this. Hey, Gunther, there's this general notion out here. It was a question from a German guy, says that the biggest impediments to Scrum are middle management. How do you feel about that? So I had to think a little bit about that, and I came up with the idea, and in the end, use that in my book. First of all, my core belief is do not label people as impediments. I don't care what they are, states, whatever. People are not impediments. Impediments are in structures, processes, procedures, maybe the organization, whatever. It's like that same sort of, I say that sick abuse of labeling people as waste as part of a lean movement. Yeah, label people as waste means I'm giving myself an excuse to fire them, to remove them. So don't label people as impediments. Try to be inclusive, and like Len described, have great Scrum Masters, coaches around to sort of help them rethink their relationship with self-organizing people.
Yeah, and just last thing on this one before we move on, but I know it's so easy for me. It's like usually I'm an external coach, and so it's so easy for me to be brave. Like the worst thing they could do for me is take away my security badge, and like, okay, that's we'll deal with that. If you are an internal Scrum Master or internal coach, I just can't recommend enough for you to start crafting ways to have these meaningful conversations with leaders. I wrote something just recently called "How to Have the Tough Conversations." It's up on my blog. So if you're not sure, like, how do you enter, like the question that was bubbled up is like, leaders are still acting in a command and control way. How do I have that conversation with that person and say, listen, how you're acting and how you're talking here, your behaviors are causing damage to this team. And so I'd recommend maybe just reading that blog. I'll throw that up on the chat as well in a little bit. But it just walks through a simple little scenario for you. You're an internal Scrum Master or coach, and you're afraid because it could cost you your job, potentially, I suppose, to have that conversation. But it's if we don't have those conversations and allow this status quo to continue to flourish, then it's just going to get worse. And in fact, you might as well not go to Scrum or Agile. You might as well stick with what you had before, because the system, the organization has learned how to accommodate that poor behavior. If you have these two worlds of a really cool Agile environment and poor leadership behaviors, that's oil and water. It's just going to be like sandpaper running on your skin constantly, like constant irritation. Yeah. I'd love to hear real quickly from David and Rich, if you've got any thoughts that you've worked with leaders as well. That's just it's a huge situation that we probably uncover or have hit us all the time.
Okay, cool. I just want to add something, and then I want to throw in the last question to you, Len, that I see in the window. But first, I want to have something that shows my personal view on why I like this article so much, becoming a radiating team. Because sort of for me, one of the underlying messages is, without it being explicit in the article, is that Scrum teams have so much information at hand, available, that they can radiate, that they can use to sort of start growing trust. Now, that radiating that stuff often requires a lot of courage. Now that is in two ways for me a sort of barometer function of the way Scrum is being adopted, enacted, whatever within the organization. First of all, does the team have the courage to do that radiating stuff? And if they don't have, go figure out why. Rather than blaming them for not doing that, help them figure out why are you not doing that. And imagine they have the courage and it is not being received well by the organization, by managers, leadership, and so on. That's probably the next thing you want to tackle. Yeah. Why are people not accepting it? We have a courageous team reading that information. That's sort of one of the messages. Now the last question, and one of them has gone away, but at least there was a question from Joe and May. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the Joe from the Netherlands who's working a lot with Cesario Ramos. And I'm assuming that Rich and David Starr will know him. Cesario is also a Les guy. It's also part of the Plop community of James Copeland. So Joan asks about, I think the velocity should be kept stable for a long time until the definition of done is very broad. How much risk do you see in giving the velocity such importance with the chance of people gaming it? It describes output, not outcomes. So what are the dangers in focusing or refocusing in a way back on velocity? By the way, that's also the little edgy thing I like about this paragraph. That's why I like it to be in the article, because us typical Scrum guys, we all say velocity is for the team, don't use it, it's abused all the time, it's not productivity and so on. And here we have this great guy saying, no, you should radiate it. You should have the ultimate courage to radiate your velocity.
Yeah.
What's the danger?
Yeah, and ultimately you need that velocity to kind of figure out what your burnout chart is. Like, what are you producing and what are your outcomes? You know, I when I wrote this, you kind of re-looked at it to get it published with the book. You know, I was wondering, do I keep velocity in there? And I see a lot of articles. I think I just saw one yesterday, kind of go through either LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it is. It says, don't use velocity. And I was like, well, why is that? And so I read the article. You know, is the number wrong? Is the measurement wrong? And basically everything in the article listed out, well, it's what's done with that number. And the number itself isn't bad, but it's managers using that and comparing it with other teams, or it's using it as a performance metric. And so my feeling is, if there is anything, velocity or anything, that triggers a reaction that bubbles up poor behavior in leaders, then do more of it. You know, we've got to flush that out of the system. It's not the velocity that's the issue. It's not the number. It's a symptom. It's a trigger that's causing these leaders to act poorly. So my response to anytime I hear about velocity or anything that says, boy, if we do this, my leader, or we're going to game it, or my leader is going to act this way, or they're going to use this against us. And then we say, okay, let's amp. That's something you should be radiating even more. And now let's get the bravery to start addressing those real issues. So, I mean, that's my stance on velocity. I'd love to hear, Rich and David, what your thoughts are, and if you've used it, or any other thoughts on it.
Can I just throw in something, because Michael Forney had a question, but it's out there, but somebody also put it in the chat window. What's your view then, Len, if you're sort of saying like things like that about velocity? What's your point of view then of bringing in alternative metrics to velocity? So skipping a velocity and then thinking about maybe things like cycle time or other things.
Sure. I think anything that the team feels that is going to be beneficial to radiate, I'd say go for it. This is just probably a good example, but cycle time improvement, anything. So this was the whole premise of this is radiating improvement. So if there's another metric that they feel is a good one, then go for it. Yeah, David, were you going to say something? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I was thinking about the idea that when we increase our definition of done to improve quality in our systems, we often have a drop in velocity. And that is because we're spending time working on things that support the construction of our product rather than a product feature, perhaps. And so when we observe those patterns in velocity that aren't necessarily even, you know, one of the things I saw someone mention was they want to see a stable velocity number. Do we really want to see stability in our velocity? Is that a thing? Or can we take into account these extraneous circumstances?
Yeah, dead on.
And I was just thinking, as you were talking about velocity and the possible abuse, Len, that you can bring in alternative metrics, and they probably have the same dangers in themselves, like being gamed and not being understood by management or abused and so on. So,
Exactly. Cool.
okay, cool.
Good.
We're sort of at the end of our time box of the complete session. All questions have been answered. A few of them have been dismissed, but not too many. So I want to thank, first of all, Rich, Len, David, for being here, making the time available, getting out of bed so early, David. So thank you
Gunther,
very
for
much.
making all of this happen. You're the man behind the orchestration here, and you've created a wonderful thing.
It's amazing. We had about
Absolutely.
60 participants and still online. So thank you, everybody, 60 people, for being here. I hope you find some joy in this. I hope you got some things about it. And who knows, you might want to get the book. 97 articles. We've now only read 3 of them. Imagine how much time we could spend on going through all of the other ones too.
It's worth it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Hope to see you guys in some future webinar, Zoom meeting, and hopefully at some point in time back again, in real life. Okay.
Super.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Hey,
Thanks, Gunther.
bye-bye.
Len, David, see you guys.